Imagine working the same coffee shop shift for 5 years, thinking you've finally moved on from your past, when suddenly the person who shattered your heart walks through the door and orders their usual drink like no time has passed at all. What would you do? Would you pretend not to remember? Or would your hands shake as you made their favorite coffee exactly the way they used to love it? Before we dive into this emotional journey, please subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. The afternoon rain was drumming against the windows when the door chimed, and my entire world shifted on its axis. I was wiping down the espresso machine for the 3rd time when she walked in. Harper Evans, 5 years older, wearing a charcoal gray business suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Her dark hair shorter now and styled with that effortless precision that screamed corporate success. My heart stopped beating for a full second. She was scrolling through her phone, completely absorbed in whatever crisis demanded her immediate attention. The same focused intensity that used to fascinate me in college, when she'd study for hours with that little crease between her eyebrows. I could have ducked into the back room, could have let Jake handle this customer while I hid among the coffee bean bags like a coward. But my feet stayed planted behind the counter, watching her approach with that confident stride I'd fallen in love with when we were 19. "Just give me 1 second," she said, without looking up, her fingers flying across her phone screen. I gripped the edge of the counter so hard my knuckles went white. 5 years of wondering what I'd say if I ever saw her again, and my mind went completely blank. All those imaginary conversations I'd rehearsed in the shower, all those clever comebacks I'd crafted during sleepless nights. Gone. She finally looked up from her phone, and our eyes met across 3 feet of reclaimed wood counter. I watched recognition dawn on her face like sunrise breaking through storm clouds. Her phone slipped slightly in her manicured hands. "Mia." Her voice came out as barely a whisper, like she was afraid saying my name too loud might make me disappear. "Hi, Harper." I somehow managed to keep my voice steady, professional. "What can I get you today?" She blinked twice, like she was trying to process whether this was really happening or just some elaborate caffeine withdrawal hallucination. Her green eyes, those same impossible green eyes that used to make me forget my own name, swept across the cafe, taking in the exposed brick walls, the mismatched vintage furniture, the chalkboard menu I'd rewritten that morning in my careful handwriting. "You work here?" she asked, and I caught something in her tone. Surprise? Maybe? Disappointment? I couldn't tell. 5 years now. I wiped my hands on my apron, a nervous habit I'd never managed to shake. "So, what can I get you?" The question hung between us like smoke. She was staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite read, confusion mixed with something that might have been regret, or maybe just shock at finding me here. In this little corner of Portland she'd probably forgotten existed. I wasn't expecting... She ran a hand through her perfectly styled hair, messing it up slightly. "This is your place?" "Not mine. I just work here." I gestured toward the menu board behind me, proud of the careful calligraphy I'd spent hours perfecting. "But I make a mean latte," she laughed, short and breathless, and the sound hit me like a physical blow. "You always did." The memory crashed over me without warning. Sunday mornings in our tiny shared apartment, Harper wrapped in my oversized Portland State sweatshirt, watching me experiment with different coffee blends and milk temperatures. She'd been my willing test subject, rating each attempt with theatrical seriousness, making elaborate scorecards and keeping detailed notes about which combinations worked best. "So," I said, forcing myself back to the present moment, back to this strange reality where Harper Evans was standing in my cafe like a ghost from my past. "What'll it be?" Harper looked at me for a long moment, and I could practically see the wheels turning in her head. She was probably calculating the fastest way to order something simple and escape, to pretend this awkward encounter had never happened, to go back to her important Seattle life and forget she'd ever stumbled into this reminder of who she used to be. Instead, she surprised me. "Surprise me," she said, sliding her phone into her expensive leather purse and giving me her full attention for the first time since she'd walked through the door. My breath caught in my throat. "Surprise you? You're the expert." She leaned slightly against the counter, and I caught a whiff of her perfume, something sophisticated and floral that I didn't recognize. I trust you. Those 3 words hit me harder than they should have. I trust you. The same words she'd whispered the night before she left, when I'd promised her everything would work out, that we'd figure out our future together, that love would be enough to overcome whatever obstacles life threw at us. I'd been catastrophically wrong about that. But standing there, looking into her eyes, I knew exactly what to make her. My hands moved on autopilot, muscle memory taking over where my brain had short-circuited. 2 shots of espresso, steamed milk heated to exactly 150 degrees, a dash of vanilla syrup, and just a hint of cinnamon on top. Harper's favorite. The drink I'd perfected for her during our 3 years together. The one she'd ordered every morning before her 8 a.m. economics class. The one I'd made her on lazy Saturday mornings when we had nowhere to be except tangled up in each other's arms. I worked in silence, hyper-aware of Harper watching my every movement. The familiar rhythm of grinding beans and steaming milk usually calmed my nerves, but today my hands trembled slightly as I pulled the espresso shots. She was leaning against the counter now, no longer pretending to be busy with her phone. I could feel her gaze like a physical weight, studying my face, my movements, probably cataloging all the ways I'd changed in 5 years. "You redecorated?" she said, breaking the silence that had stretched between us. I glanced around the cafe, confused. Actually, this is exactly how it looked when I started working here. Right. She cleared her throat, and I caught a hint of embarrassment in her voice. I meant, you look different. I risked a look at her while the milk steamed, creating that perfect microfoam she'd always been particular about. Different how? Older. Good different, she added quickly, like she was afraid I'd take offense. You look settled. Content, settled. The word stung more than it should have, like I was some middle-aged suburban mom who'd given up on adventure and excitement. I wanted to tell her about the art classes I'd been taking at the community college, about the short story I'd published in a local literary magazine, about the way I'd learned to be genuinely happy on my own terms. Instead, I just nodded and focused on the latte art, creating a small heart in the foam out of pure muscle memory. My face flushed as I realized what I'd done, but it was too late to fix it without starting over. You look successful, I said, which was undeniably true. Everything about her screamed achievement. The expensive suit, the confident posture, the way she'd walked into my cafe like she owned not just the room, but the entire world. I do okay. She was being modest, but I could see the pride in her eyes, the satisfaction of someone who'd worked hard and seen it pay off. Harper had always been ambitious, always had a detailed 5-year plan and backup plans for her backup plans. I finished her latte and slid it across the counter, careful to avoid any contact between our fingers. Here you go. Harper lifted the cup to her lips and took a small, tentative sip. I watched her face intently, looking for any sign of recognition, any hint that she remembered this exact combination of flavors. Her eyes widened slightly. She took another sip, slower this time, more deliberate, and I saw something shift in her expression. Surprise giving way to something deeper, more complex. This is... She stared down at the cup like it contained the secrets of the universe. How did you... Lucky guess, I lied, my voice coming out rougher than I'd intended. She took another sip, and I watched her shoulders relax for the first time since she'd walked in. It tastes exactly like... She trailed off, but we both knew what she was going to say. Like the ones I used to make you, like Sunday mornings and shared dreams, and a time when we thought forever was a realistic goal instead of a naive fantasy. Like what? I asked, even though I knew I was torturing myself by prolonging this conversation. Like home, she said quietly. So quietly I almost didn't hear her over the hiss of the espresso machine. The words hung between us, heavy with everything we weren't saying, everything we couldn't say. A customer walked in behind her. Mrs. Chen, one of my regulars. And I should have acknowledged her immediately, should have maintained some semblance of professional service. Instead, I stood frozen, staring at the woman who'd once been my entire world, who'd taught me what love felt like, and then shown me exactly how much it could hurt when it disappeared. Mia, dear. Mrs. Chen cleared her throat politely, but I could hear the curiosity in her voice. Sorry, Mrs. Chen. I shook myself back to reality, back to my job, back to the life I'd built without Harper Evans. I'll be right with you. Harper stepped aside gracefully, but she didn't leave. Instead, she found a small table by the window and settled in, cradling her latte like it was something precious and fragile. I served Mrs. Chen her usual green tea and blueberry scone, going through the familiar motions while remaining hyper-aware of Harper's presence. Every few minutes, I'd catch her looking at me, and she'd quickly glance away, pretending to be fascinated by the rain streaking down the windows. When the cafe emptied again, she approached the counter with her empty cup. I should probably go, she said, but she made no move toward the door. Probably, I agreed, though part of me wanted to beg her to stay, to explain where she'd been for 5 years, to tell me why she'd left without a real goodbye. I have a meeting at 4. I glanced at the vintage clock on the wall. A garage sale find I'd convinced the owner to let me hang up. It was 3:15. That's soon, I observed. Yeah. She took a deep breath, like she was gathering courage for something. This is really good, Mia. The coffee. You always were talented with flavors and combinations, thanks. I busied myself wiping down the already spotless counter, needing something to do with my hands. So you're back in Portland, just for work. I live in Seattle now. Of course she did. Seattle was bigger, more opportunities, more everything that Portland couldn't offer. Portland had always felt too small for Harper's ambitions, too quirky and laid back for someone who wanted to conquer the corporate world. How long are you in town? I asked, trying to sound casual, like her answer didn't matter to me at all. Few days. Maybe a week, depending on how the project goes. I nodded like this information was just polite small talk, like I wasn't already calculating whether she might come back tomorrow, whether I'd see her again before she disappeared back into her Seattle life. Well, she said, gathering her purse and straightening her jacket with practiced efficiency. I should really... Yeah, of course. Don't want to be late for your meeting. She headed for the door, and I watched her go, telling myself this was better, cleaner. A brief encounter, nothing more. Like running into an old classmate at the grocery store. Awkward for a moment, then forgotten. She paused with her hand on the door handle and turned back. Mia? Yeah? Thank you. For the coffee. She seemed to struggle for words. It was perfect. And then she was gone, leaving only the faint scent of her unfamiliar perfume and the echo of everything we'd left unsaid 5 years ago. Word count. 1,450 words, verified. The next morning, I arrived at work 45 minutes early, which was completely ridiculous because Harper probably wouldn't come back. Why would she? She had her important Seattle life, her corporate meetings, her carefully constructed world that had moved on without me. But I found myself checking the door every time the bell chimed, my heart doing this stupid little skip whenever someone with dark hair walked past the window. I rearranged the pastry display twice, cleaned the espresso machine until it gleamed, and reorganized the coffee bean containers in alphabetical order. Jake noticed my nervous energy immediately. You're wound tighter than a spring today, he said, tying his apron behind his back with practiced efficiency. Everything okay? Fine. I arranged the croissants in the display case for the 3rd time, making sure they were perfectly aligned. Just want everything to look good. Uh-huh. Jake had been working at the cafe almost as long as I had, and he could read my moods like a well-worn book. This wouldn't have anything to do with that woman who came in yesterday? The one who made you look like you'd seen a ghost? I don't know what you're talking about, right? He started the first batch of coffee for the morning rush, the familiar sounds of grinding and brewing filling the quiet cafe. The one who ordered that mystery drink that you somehow knew how to make perfectly without asking a single question? I shot him a warning look. You were eavesdropping? Hard not to when you two were staring at each other like you were in some kind of romantic movie. He grinned, clearly enjoying my discomfort. So, ex-girlfriend, Jake. I'm just saying, the sexual tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. And the way she looked at you when she thought you weren't watching, Like you were the answer to a question she'd been asking for years. Can we please not discuss my non-existent love life while we're preparing food for customers? Non-existent, huh? He raised an eyebrow. So she is an ex. Before I could deny it or tell him to mind his own business, the bell chimed. I looked up, and there she was. Harper stood in the doorway, looking slightly uncertain. She was wearing dark jeans today, and a soft gray cashmere sweater that I recognized from college. My heart did that stupid skip again, and I had to grip the counter to steady myself. "I'll take this one," I told Jake, who was watching with undisguised interest and amusement. Harper approached the counter slowly, like she was approaching a wild animal that might bolt at any sudden movement. "Hi," she said, her voice softer than yesterday. "Hi." I wiped my hands on my apron, that nervous habit making another appearance. "Back for more punishment?" She smiled. And for a second, she looked exactly like the girl I'd fallen in love with at 19, uncertain and hopeful and achingly beautiful. Something like that. Same as yesterday? Actually, she hesitated, biting her lower lip in that way that used to drive me crazy. "Could you make it a large this time, and maybe add an extra shot?" I nodded and got to work, grateful for the familiar routine that gave me something to focus on besides the way she was watching my every movement. The espresso machine hissed and gurgled, and I found myself falling into the meditative rhythm of making coffee. "You're really good at that," she said, leaning against the counter. 5 years of practice. Right. She was quiet for a moment, and I could feel her studying my profile. "Mia, about yesterday." You don't have to explain anything. I kept my eyes on the espresso shots, watching the golden crema form on top. "It's fine." "It's not fine, though. I was rude. Awkward. I wasn't expecting to see you." I glanced up at her, taking in the way her hair caught the morning light, the way her green eyes were more serious than they'd been yesterday. "Were you expecting to never see me again?" The question came out sharper than I'd intended, carrying more hurt than I'd meant to reveal. Harper flinched slightly like I'd slapped her. "I don't know what I was expecting," she said quietly. "I try not to think about Portland much anymore. Because it's too small for your ambitions? Because it hurts too much?" The honesty in her voice caught me off guard. I finished her latte, this time managing to avoid any heart-shaped foam art, and slid it across the counter. "Here you go." Our fingers brushed when she took the cup, just for a second, but I felt that familiar electric shock that used to drive me crazy. She felt it too. I could tell by the way her breath caught, the way she pulled her hand back just a little too quickly. "Thank you," she said. This time, instead of finding a table, she stayed at the counter. The morning rush was starting to trickle in. Early commuters grabbing their caffeine fix before facing another day, but I found myself reluctant to serve other customers, to break whatever fragile connection we were rebuilding. "So," I said, "how's Seattle treating you?" "It's good. Different from here, but good." She took a sip of her latte, and I watched her face relax slightly. "I work for a consulting firm. We help companies streamline their operations, improve efficiency." "It sounds very corporate." She laughed, and the sound was lighter than yesterday. "It is, but I like it. The challenge, the problem-solving, the way you can take something broken and figure out how to fix it. You always were good at fixing things." The words slipped out before I could stop them, and we both knew I wasn't talking about business operations. Harper's smile faded slightly, and she stared down at her coffee. "Not everything," she said quietly. A customer approached the counter, a businessman in an expensive suit who was clearly in a hurry, and I had to turn away to take his order. When I looked back, Harper was staring out the window, her expression unreadable. "Harper," I said, when the customer left with his triple-shot Americano. "Yeah? Why did you come back today?" She was quiet for so long I thought she wasn't going to answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Because I couldn't stop thinking about that coffee. About how you remembered exactly how I liked it, down to the temperature and the amount of foam." She looked at me then, and her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "About how you remembered me." My throat felt tight. "I remember a lot of things. So do I." We stared at each other across the counter, and I felt like we were 19 again. Having one of those conversations where everything important was said in the spaces between words, in the things we couldn't quite bring ourselves to say out loud. "I should go," she said, but she didn't move. "Your meeting?" "No meeting today, She shook her head. "This is complicated, Mia. It doesn't have to be." "Doesn't it?" She finished her latte and set the empty cup on the counter with careful precision. "We're different people now. We want different things. We live in different cities. Do we want different things?" She didn't answer. Instead, she gathered her purse and headed for the door, just like yesterday. But this time she paused before leaving. "What time do you get off work?" My heart stopped. 6. She nodded once, then walked out into the gray Portland morning, leaving me standing behind the counter with my heart hammering against my ribs and hope blooming in my chest like a dangerous flower. At 6:15, I found Harper sitting on the bench outside the cafe, hunched under a small black umbrella as the evening drizzle painted everything in shades of gray. She looked like she'd been there for a while, staring at her phone but not really seeing it. "You're still here," I said, stating the obvious because my brain had apparently forgotten how to form coherent thoughts. She looked up, and I saw relief flash across her face. "I wasn't sure you'd want to see me. I'm here, aren't I?" She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Want to walk? I know a place where we can talk without getting completely soaked." We fell into step beside each other, sharing her umbrella in a way that felt both natural and terrifying. Our shoulders bumped occasionally as we navigated the narrow sidewalks, and each time it happened, I felt that same electric awareness that had never quite faded, even after 5 years of trying to forget. She led me to Pioneer Courthouse Square, where we found shelter under the covered area near the MAC station. The square was mostly empty, except for a few commuters hurrying home and a street musician packing up his guitar case, counting the day's earnings. "I used to come here sometimes," Harper said, settling onto one of the concrete benches. After what?" "After I left." She was quiet for a moment, watching the rain fall beyond our shelter. "I'd drive down from Seattle, tell myself I was just visiting friends or checking out job opportunities. But I'd always end up here, wondering if I'd run into you." I sat down beside her, leaving careful space between us, even though every instinct I had was screaming at me to close the distance. "You never did." "No? I was probably too much of a coward to actually look for you. Why did you leave, Harper?" The question I'd been carrying for 5 years finally escaped, hanging between us like a challenge. She'd been expecting it. I could tell by the way her shoulders tensed, the way she took a deep breath like she was preparing for surgery. "You know why?" "No, I really don't." I turned to face her fully, needing to see her expression. One day we were talking about moving in together after graduation, making plans for the future, and the next day you were telling me you needed space to figure things out. What was I supposed to figure out from that? She was quiet for so long I thought she wasn't going to answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. I hadn't heard from her in years. I was scared. Of what? Of us. Of how much I loved you. Of how easy it would be to just disappear into that love and never find my way back to myself. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. God, that sounds so selfish now. It sounds honest. I was 22, Mia. I had this whole plan for my life. Graduate school, career, success. And suddenly all I wanted was to spend every day making coffee with you in our tiny kitchen. It terrified me. I remembered that kitchen. The way Harper would sit on the counter while I cooked, stealing tastes and making me laugh until my sides hurt. The way she'd wrap her arms around my waist from behind while I did dishes, pressing kisses to my neck that made me forget whatever I'd been thinking about. "So you left." "So I left." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, smearing her carefully applied mascara. "I thought if I could just get some distance, some perspective, I'd be able to come back and love you the right way. The way you deserved. And I was an idiot. By the time I realized that what we had was exactly right, that there was no right way to love someone, except completely and honestly. You'd changed your number, moved apartments. I didn't know how to find you." I stared at her, feeling like the ground had shifted beneath my feet. "Harper, I lived in the same apartment for 2 years after you left." "What?" "Same apartment, same phone number. I kept thinking you'd call or show up or send me some sign that you were ready to try again. I shook my head, remembering those long months of waiting, of jumping every time the phone rang. I waited for you. Her face crumpled like I'd hit her. Oh God. Mia, I'm so sorry. I assumed you'd moved on, that you'd want nothing to do with me after the way I left. I tried to move on. I pulled my jacket tighter around myself, suddenly cold despite the mild evening. Dated other people, threw myself into work, convinced myself I was better off without you. Were you better off? I considered lying, giving her the answer that would hurt less, that would let us both walk away from this conversation with our dignity intact. But we'd had enough lies between us, enough careful omissions and half-truths. No, I said quietly. I wasn't. We sat in silence for a while, watching the rain fall beyond our shelter. The street musician had finished packing up and was wheeling his equipment toward the Max platform, whistling something I didn't recognize. I have a life in Seattle, Harper said eventually. I know. A good job, a nice apartment. I've built something there. I'm not asking you to give that up, aren't you? I looked at her, this woman who'd broken my heart and somehow still held all the pieces, who was sitting here in the rain talking about the past, like it was something we could change. I'm not asking you for anything, Harper. I'm glad you're here, right now, in this moment. She reached over and took my hand, threading our fingers together like she used to when we were young and thought love could conquer anything. Her skin was warm, familiar, and I felt something inside my chest that had been frozen for 5 years start to thaw. I missed you, she whispered. I missed you too. We sat there holding hands like teenagers, and for a moment, it felt like no time had passed at all. Like we were still those girls who'd believed forever was a realistic goal instead of a naive fantasy. What happens now? I asked. I don't know. She squeezed my hand, and I felt her trembling slightly. I fly back to Seattle on Sunday. That's 3 days. 3 days, she agreed. I turned to look at her, this woman who'd taught me what love felt like and then shown me exactly how much it could hurt when it disappeared. Rain was still falling beyond our shelter, and the evening light was fading into that soft gray that made Portland feel like a watercolor painting. Want to get dinner? I asked. She smiled, and this time it did reach her eyes. I'd like that very much. I know a place. I took her to Le Pigeon, a small French restaurant in Southeast that hadn't existed when we were together. We sat at a corner table, sharing small plates and a bottle of wine that Harper insisted on ordering, despite my protests about the price. This is incredible, she said, taking a bite of the foie gras that had made me wince when I saw the cost. Very different from the places we used to go. You mean the 24-hour diners and food carts? Hey, those food carts were amazing. Remember that Korean place on Hawthorne? The one with the kimchi tacos? I smiled at the memory. You made me try them even though I was convinced they'd be terrible. And they were the best thing I'd ever tasted. You always did have good instincts about food. About some things, she said quietly, and I caught the double meaning in her words. We ate in comfortable silence for a while, the kind of easy quiet that had always existed between us. Harper looked more relaxed than she had since walking into the cafe, her corporate armor softened by wine and candlelight. So, I said, twirling pasta around my fork, tell me about Seattle. What's your life like there? Busy, structured. I have a routine. Gym at 6 a.m., office by 8, home by 7 if I'm lucky. She took a sip of wine. I live in a high-rise downtown with a view of the Sound. It's beautiful, but it doesn't feel like home. It feels like a hotel room I've been staying in for 3 years. I studied her face in the flickering candlelight. What would home feel like? I don't know anymore. I thought I did, but she shook her head. What about you? Are you happy here? Most of the time. I like the cafe. I like my coworkers. I like the routine of it all. It's not what I thought I'd be doing at 27, but it's good work. What did you think you'd be doing? I hesitated. not sure if I wanted to open this particular door. Writing, maybe, or teaching, something creative. You always were a beautiful writer. Remember those stories you used to read to me? You were just being nice. I was not. You had this way of making ordinary moments feel magical. She leaned forward, her eyes bright with memory. There was one about a woman who collected lost things, buttons, coins, love letters. Do you still write? Sometimes. I had a story published in a local magazine last year. Mia, that's amazing. What was it about? A barista who falls in love with a regular customer's coffee order before she falls in love with the customer. Harper went very still. Oh. It was fiction, I said quickly, though we both knew it wasn't entirely. Was it a happy ending? I don't know yet. I'm still writing it. The words hung between us, heavy with implication. Harper set down her wine glass and reached across the table to take my hand. Mia, I need to tell you something, and I need you to let me finish before you say anything. My stomach dropped. That sounds ominous. It's not bad. It's just complicated. She took a deep breath. I haven't been completely honest with you about my life in Seattle. I pulled my hand back slightly. What do you mean? I mean, I've been going through the motions for months, maybe longer. I have this great job, this beautiful apartment, and I should be happy. But I wake up every morning feeling like I'm living someone else's life. Harper, let me finish. She looked directly into my eyes, and I saw something there I hadn't seen since we were young. Vulnerability, raw and unguarded. I've dated other people, tried to fall in love again, but no one ever made me feel the way you did. No one ever came close. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure the other diners could hear it. What are you saying? I'm saying that seeing you again made me realize I've been sleepwalking for 5 years, that I've been so focused on building this perfect life that I forgot what actually makes me happy. And what makes you happy? You. The word came out as barely a whisper. You make me happy, Mia. You always did. I felt tears prick at my eyes. Harper, you can't just say things like that and then fly back to Seattle on Sunday. What if I didn't? What? What if I didn't fly back? What if I stayed? I stared at her across the table, sure I'd misheard. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious about anything in my life. She leaned forward, her eyes intense. I could work remotely for a while, figure something out. Portland has consulting firms. I could start over. You'd give up everything you've built? What have I built, really? A career that pays well but doesn't fulfill me? An apartment that feels like a showroom? A life that looks good on paper but feels empty in reality? I was quiet for a long moment, trying to process what she was saying. Harper, this is crazy. You can't upend your entire life because of a few days of nostalgia. Is that what you think this is? Nostalgia? I don't know what to think. She stood up abruptly and moved to the chair beside me, taking both of my hands in hers. The other diners probably thought we were having some kind of romantic moment, but I felt like I was drowning. Look at me, she said softly. I met her eyes, and the intensity there took my breath away. I love you, she said. I never stopped loving you, and I know that's not fair, and I know I have no right to say it after what I did, but it's the truth. You're the truth, Mia. Everything else has just been me trying to convince myself I could live without you. Tears were streaming down my face now. Harper, I know it's scary. I know we're different people now, and I know there are no guarantees. But I also know that I'd rather fail at loving you than succeed at anything else. I pulled my hands free and wiped my eyes with my napkin. You broke my heart. I know. You left me when I needed you most. I know. How do I know you won't do it again? She was quiet for a long moment, and when she spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. You don't. I can't promise you that I won't mess this up again, because I'm still learning how to be brave, but I can promise you that I'll try. Every day, I'll try to be the person you deserve. I looked at her sitting there, tears on her cheeks, her heart laid bare between the wine glasses and half-eaten plates. This was Harper without the armor, without the perfect facade she'd built around herself. This was the girl I'd fallen in love with, vulnerable and real, and asking me to take the biggest leap of faith imaginable. "I love you too," I whispered. Her face lit up like sunrise. "Yeah?" "Yeah. I never stopped either." She kissed me then, right there in the middle of the restaurant, and I didn't care who was watching. Her lips tasted like wine and possibility, and when she pulled back, we were both smiling through our tears. "So what happens now?" I asked. "Now we figure it out together." "Together?" "Together." She squeezed my hands. "If you'll have me." I looked at this woman who'd broken my heart and somehow still held all the pieces, who was offering me everything I'd ever wanted and everything I was terrified to hope for. "Yes," I said, "I'll have you." Harper showed up at the cafe the next day at 2 p.m., just as the lunch rush was winding down. She was wearing a navy blue dress that hugged her curves in all the right places, and her hair was pulled back in a sleek ponytail that made her look like she'd stepped out of a business magazine. "Fancy meeting you here," I said, trying to keep my voice casual, despite the way my pulse quickened at the sight of her. I was in the neighborhood. She leaned against the counter, and I caught a whiff of her perfume, still that sophisticated floral scent I didn't recognize. "How's your day been?" "Better now." She smiled, and I felt that familiar flutter in my stomach, the same one I'd been getting since I was 19 years old. "Can you take a break?" I glanced around the cafe. Jake was handling the register, and we only had a few customers scattered at tables, most of them absorbed in their laptops or books. "Jake," I called, "I'm taking 15. "Take 30, he called back with a knowing grin. "I've got this covered." Harper and I found a quiet table in the back corner, away from the afternoon crowd. She'd ordered her usual, which I now made without asking, and I'd prepared myself a simple Americano. "So," I said, settling into my chair, "how was your morning meeting?" "Boring. Corporate restructuring stuff that could have been handled in an email." She waved her hand dismissively. "I kept thinking about last night. Good thoughts, I hope." "The best." She reached across the table and took my hand, her fingers warm against mine. "Mia, I need to tell you something." My stomach dropped slightly. That sounds ominous. "No, it's not bad. It's just, I haven't been completely honest with you about something." I pulled my hand back slightly, feeling that familiar defensive wall starting to rise. "About what?" "About Seattle. About my life there." She took a deep breath, like she was gathering courage. "I told you I had everything I wanted, but that's not entirely true." "What do you mean?" "I mean, I've been going through the motions for months. Maybe longer." She stared down at her coffee, tracing patterns in the foam with her spoon. "I have this great job, this beautiful apartment, and I should be happy. But I wake up every morning feeling like I'm living someone else's life." "Harper, let me finish." And she looked up at me, and her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I've dated other people, tried to fall in love again. There was this woman, Sarah, who was perfect on paper, successful, beautiful, kind. We dated for 8 months. My chest tightened. What happened? Nothing happened. That was the problem. She was wonderful, and I felt nothing. Every time she kissed me, every time she told me she loved me, all I could think about was you, about how different it felt when you touched me." I felt my cheeks flush. "Harper, I know this is hard to hear, but I need you to understand that seeing you again didn't just bring back old feelings. It made me realize that those feelings never left, that I've been sleepwalking through my life, trying to convince myself I was happy because I was supposed to be. And what makes you happy? You." The word came out as barely a whisper. "You make me happy, Mia. You always did. The way you hum when you're concentrating. The way you get excited about small things like perfect foam art or a good book. The way you make everyone around you feel seen and valued." My throat felt tight with emotion. "You can't just say things like that." "Why not?" "Because it's not fair. Because you left, Harper. You chose your career and your plans over us. And now you want to come back and pretend like nothing happened. I'm not pretending nothing happened. I'm acknowledging that I made the biggest mistake of my life." She leaned forward, her voice urgent. "I was 22, and scared, and stupid. And I thought I had to choose between loving you and becoming the person I wanted to be. I didn't realize that loving you was part of becoming that person. I was quiet for a long moment, trying to process everything she was saying. What are you asking me, Harper? I'm asking for a second chance. I'm asking you to let me prove that I'm not the same scared girl who ran away 5 years ago. And if I say yes, what then? You move back to Portland and we pretend like we're 22 again? No. We acknowledge that we're 27 now, that we've both grown and changed, and we see if the people we've become can build something together. I studied her face in the afternoon light streaming through the cafe windows. She looked older, more confident, but there was something in her eyes that reminded me of the girl I'd fallen in love with. Hope mixed with fear, vulnerability disguised as certainty. I'm scared, I admitted. So am I. You hurt me, Harper. Really hurt me. It took me years to feel like myself again. I know, and I'll spend the rest of my life making up for that if you'll let me. A customer approached our table, Mrs. Chen, looking curious about my companion. I introduced them quickly, and Harper was charming and polite, but I could see the impatience in her eyes, the need to finish our conversation. When Mrs. Chen left, Harper turned back to me with renewed intensity. Mia, I know I don't deserve another chance. I know I have no right to walk back into your life and ask you to risk your heart again. But I also know that what we had was real and rare and worth fighting for. Was it? Worth fighting for? Because you didn't fight for it 5 years ago. You're right. I didn't fight for it then because I was a coward. But I'm fighting for it now. I looked at her sitting there, tears on her cheeks, her heart laid bare in the middle of my workplace. This was Harper without the corporate armor, without the perfect facade she'd built around herself. This was the girl who used to read me poetry in bed, who cried during sad movies, who made me feel like I was the most important person in the world. If we do this, I said slowly, if we try again, it has to be different. We have to be honest with each other, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. I can do that. And you have to be sure, really sure, because I can't go through losing you again. I'm sure. She reached across the table and took both of my hands in hers. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. I looked into her green eyes, searching for any sign of doubt, any hint that this was just nostalgia or loneliness talking. But all I saw was love, complicated, imperfect, but absolutely real. Okay, I whispered. Okay? Okay, let's try again. She kissed me then, right there in the middle of the cafe, and I didn't care who was watching. Her lips were soft and familiar, and when she pulled back, we were both smiling through our tears. I love you, she said. I love you too. And for the first time in 5 years, saying those words felt like coming home. 3 months later, I was arranging pastries in the display case when the bell chimed. I looked up to see Harper walking through the door, her laptop bag slung over her shoulder, and that familiar smile lighting up her face like sunshine. Good morning, beautiful, she said, approaching the counter with the confidence of someone who belonged here. Good morning, yourself. I leaned across to give her a quick kiss, still marveling at how natural this felt, how right. How's the new office treating you? Still smells like fresh paint and possibility, but I think I'm going to like it. She'd found a position with a local consulting firm, taking a significant pay cut, but gaining something infinitely more valuable. The chance to build a life that actually felt like hers. The usual? I asked, already reaching for the espresso beans. Actually, she paused, and I caught something mischievous in her expression. I was thinking of trying something new today. I raised an eyebrow, genuinely surprised. Harper Evans wants to try something new? Are you feeling okay? Do you have a fever? Very funny, she grinned, and I saw traces of the girl I'd fallen in love with in college, the one who'd been willing to try kimchi tacos and midnight poetry readings. I was thinking maybe you could surprise me, like you did that first day. You want me to surprise you with coffee? I want you to surprise me with everything. The words carried weight beyond their surface, meaning, and I felt that familiar flutter in my chest. Even after 3 months of rebuilding what we'd lost, of learning to trust each other again, she could still make my heart race with a simple sentence. I got to work on her drink, but this time I experimented. A little lavender syrup, a touch of honey, steamed oat milk instead of regular dairy, and a sprinkle of cardamom on top, something new, but with the foundation of everything she'd always loved. "Here," I said, sliding the cup across the counter. "One surprise, as requested." She took a tentative sip, and her eyes widened with genuine delight. "This is incredible. What did you put in it?" "Trade secret." "Come on, tell me." "I promise I won't try to recreate it at home and put you out of business." "Nope. You said you wanted to be surprised." She laughed, and the sound filled the cafe like music. "I love it when you're mysterious. I love it when you're adventurous." Jake appeared from the back room, carrying a tray of fresh muffins that made the whole cafe smell like cinnamon and butter. "You two are disgustingly cute, you know that." "Jealous?" Harper asked, taking another sip of her experimental latte. "Absolutely. Mia never makes me special drinks with secret ingredients." "That's because you never tip," I shot back. "I work here. I'm not supposed to tip myself." Harper watched our familiar banter with amusement, and I caught her looking at me with that soft expression that still made my knees weak after all these months. "What?" I asked. "Nothing. I love watching you here, in your element. This old place. This place where you're completely yourself. Where you know everyone's order and everyone's story. Where you make magic happen with coffee beans and milk foam." She reached across the counter and took my hand. "Where you built a life that's entirely your own." I felt my cheeks warm. "It's just coffee, Harper." "No, it's not." Her voice was serious now, weighted with emotion. "It's home. You made this place home, and now you're teaching me what that feels like again." My throat felt tight. "Harper, I know we're taking it slow. I know we're still figuring things out, still learning to trust each other again. But I need you to know that this, us, here, now, this is everything I never knew I was looking for." A customer walked in, and I reluctantly let go of her hand to serve them. Harper found her usual table by the window and settled in with her laptop, working on whatever project was currently consuming her attention. This had become our routine over the past 3 months. She'd stop by in the morning for coffee and conversation, work from the cafe for a few hours when her schedule allowed, then meet me for lunch when my shift ended. It was domestic and comfortable, and everything I'd dreamed of during those long years apart. The morning passed quickly, filled with the usual rush of commuters and regulars. Mrs. Chen came in for her green tea and asked about Harper's job search, which had become a successful job acquisition. The businessman who always ordered a triple-shot Americano complimented the new seasonal menu. Jake made increasingly ridiculous faux art attempts, trying to outdo my simple hearts and leaves. Around noon, when the lunch crowd had died down to a manageable trickle, I made myself a coffee and joined Harper at her table. "Busy morning?" I asked, nodding toward her laptop. "Not too bad, just reviewing some proposals for a new client." She closed the computer and gave me her full attention, something that still felt like a small miracle. "How about you? Any interesting customers today?" "Mrs. Chen asked when you're going to make an honest woman of me." Harper nearly choked on her latte. She did not. She absolutely did. Apparently she's been taking bets with the other regulars about how long it'll take you to propose. "And what did you tell her?" "I told her we're taking things one day at a time." Very diplomatic. Harper reached across the table and took my hand, her thumb tracing gentle circles on my palm. For the record, Mrs. Chen might be onto something. My heart skipped. "Yeah? Yeah. I mean, not immediately. But someday, when we're ready, when we've rebuilt everything we lost and then some." She brought my hand to her lips and pressed a soft kiss to my knuckles. "I'd like to spend the rest of my life making you coffee and listening to your stories and falling asleep next to you every night." Tears pricked at my eyes. That sounds perfect. Even if I occasionally want to try new things? Even if I'm still learning to be brave? Especially then. The afternoon sun streamed through the cafe windows, casting golden light across our table. Outside, Portland hummed with its usual energy. Food trucks and cyclists and the gentle chaos of a city that had learned to embrace its quirks and contradictions. "Hey, Mia," Harper said softly. "Yeah? Do you still remember my favorite coffee?" I smiled, thinking of that first day when she'd walked back into my life, when she'd asked me to surprise her, and I'd made her the same drink I'd been perfecting in my memory for 5 years. "I never forgot anything about you," I said. She leaned across the table and kissed me, soft and sweet and full of promise. When we broke apart, she was smiling. "Good," she whispered, "because I'm planning on sticking around for a very long time." "How long?" "Forever, if you'll have me." I looked at this woman who'd broken my heart and put it back together, who'd left and come home, who'd chosen love over fear, and us over everything else that had once seemed more important. "Forever sounds perfect," I said. And for the first time in 5 years, I believed it completely. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, subscribe for more emotional journeys, and share your own love story in the comments below. Sometimes the best things in life are worth waiting for and worth fighting for. Until next time, keep believing in second chances.